Hi, my name is Dalia Olivares and this is the presentation of my internship report. The title is Academic and Legal Translation at the Translation Service of the School of Modern Languages. My academic advisor is Professor Johnny Palomares. Content. First, I will talk about the host institution, that is, the profile of the Translation Service Office and the activities performed. Then I will explain the reflection essay, which is Understanding Different Cultural Approaches in Academic Translation, a brief look to terminological, phraseological, and organizational differences between the US, UK, and Venezuelan education systems. And then finally, I will talk about my cultural essay, which is the role of culture in the English language terminology. And finally, I will explain some conclusions and recommendations. The Translation Service was founded in 1974 when an English translator was hired. It aims to offer translations worldwide, and it aims to offer an efficient service to give graduate students and other translators the opportunity to do internships and to be affordable for the community. The Translation Service is located in the Director's Office of the School of Modern Languages in the Faculty of Humanities and Education in Mérida, Venezuela. It also aims to translate documents for institutional and interinstitutional purposes such as high school diplomas, university degrees, official transcripts, work certificates, and course descriptions. The activities that I performed. I worked as a translation assistant with the bilingual secretary and the translator of the service, which is Ms. Belisa Barrios, who was also my institutional advisor. I mainly translate documents from Spanish to English, which we can say that was a challenge since I was used to translating from English to Spanish. And I had to adapt myself, I had to develop new skills because it was the work that I received. I also translate 2 documents from Spanish to French and 1 from English to Spanish. I translate a total of 30 documents, among which we can find university degrees, academic transcripts, work certificates, and so on. In this internship, my main task was to translate 2 engineering course descriptions from Spanish to English. I had over 3,000 words and 2,000 words in each one. Now I will explain my reflection essay, Understanding the Different Cultural Approaches in Academic Translation. So in this case, what I wanted to express or what I wanted to show was actually how education systems are based in translation, how the translation service uses education systems, and how there are different translation techniques or methods for each translation. So here my main purpose was to explain how these differences, how different cultural approaches are used at the translation service. We can say here that Borja states that it is necessary to know where the target document will be addressed, since the translator will have to adapt terminology and phraseology to the specific dialect of the country. And we also say that culture is part of the translation process, and there are different cultural approaches that are used when translating. So here I want to make clear that the main purpose of my essay was to show how there are different education systems, the differences between the education systems, and the fact that there are translation methods that can be used in each one. For example, we have 3 translation methods that are always used at the translation service, that are foreignization, domestication, and a hybrid text. Foreignization means that a target text is produced which deliberately breaks target conventions by retaining something of the foreignness of the original. Domestication entails translating in a transparent, fluent, invisible style in order to minimize the foreignness of the target text. So here, as far as I understand, foreignization means that the translator will try to make sure that the text will not be as different as it was at first. That means that, for example, if I am translating a Venezuelan university degree, I will not change the structure, because we know that there are differences between structure when regarding the US diplomas and Venezuelan diplomas. So I will leave the foreigners of the original text in this case. This is done in the translation service, and that's what I wanted to show in my essay. And domestication is the other way around. It's when you change the things that are quite different to the target text. Sometimes a hybrid text is done when the translator decides to use both foreignization and domestication in the same translation. There are differences between the education systems. For example, something really interesting is the translation of the word licenciado. First, it is important to say that licenciado is a 5-year underdegree program offered by Venezuelan universities that doesn't have an equivalent in the United States. It can be compared to bachelor's, because as Borja explains, a bachelor's degree cannot be translated as licenciado since the academic credits are not the same. A bachelor's lasts 3 years, meanwhile we have that licenciado lasts 5 years. Besides, we have that the structure of the degrees is different. For example, there is less information in the US and the UK degrees comparing to Venezuelan degrees. So when we are translating that, the translator, he needs to take into consideration what he's going to do. In the translation service, the foreignization is practiced because we are leaving the information of Venezuelan degrees just as it is, and we are actually translating it to English without erasing important information. And besides, we also have that some Venezuelan universities and institutions' names are not translated, as they seem to be very particular names of this system. For example, we have Universidad Politécnica Territorial del Estado Mérida Clever Ramírez. So in this case, there is also foreignization happening because we are leaving this name in Spanish. We are not translating it to English, and we have that. In this case, it is important to know that there is not such an equivalence in the U.S. education system or in the United Kingdom education system. So that's why it is not translated to English. Also, there are the differences between US and UK English. The differences between spelling and grammar, adapting the target text to the target reader. So that means that at the translation service, translators will try to adapt the target text each time. For example, they will take into consideration if the target text will be addressed to the United States or the United Kingdom, to adapt grammar and spelling as it should be. The role of culture in legal English. In this case, my idea was to show that culture has a role in legal English, and I didn't understood why at first. It was really something that I discovered while doing the essay. For example, I understood that legal English is really archaic because of its history. It is really connected to its history, to what happened in the past. So for example, we have that legal English is connected to the history of Great Britain, since the legal tradition is based on the common law, and legal language is defined as a language that is used by the people related to the legal profession. So in this case, I think it's important to say that lawyers don't want legal English to change, because they need to have consistency. And this consistency needs to remain, and that means that over time legal English can change, because the consistency that we have when it remains the same is important in the legal field. We have that the main characteristics of legal English are as follows: nominalization, use of passive voice, special determinators, use of particular verbs, prepositionals specifically used in legal language, and initial preposition adverbs. That means that there are forms or there are units that are used in legal English that are not used in the foreign English. That means that English-speaking lawyers have their own particular way of expressing themselves, and it is related also to the influence of Latin and Old French. So we can say here that it means that they use very complex sentences or words that have disappeared from the general language and numerous terms and expressions from Latin and Old French. Legal English has always coexisted with both French and Latin because of the Norman and Roman invasions. As a result, the Latin and French elements of the vocabulary are important. And I think it's really interesting to notice here that actually the history of legal English is directly connected to the current legal English. And that's why it is also the influence, we can see there the influence of culture in legal English, because there are like many things that happen over time that influence how legal English is done. As I previously said, it is archaic, but it is also that people don't want it to change, that it needs to remain the same. So these influences are seen at the translation service because the legal English remains the same, it remains archaic, and it is maintained when doing the translations from Spanish to English or from English to Spanish. Then finally, I will give some conclusions and recommendations. The most important thing to notice here is that it is really important for translators to always keep studying and updating themselves to maintain the quality of the final product. As I explained during my essays, there are different methods, there are different techniques that must be used when translating, and it is really important to know which technique must be used in the specific moment, because that will always depend on the specific translation and on the specific translation project. So I think that for me it was really difficult to know which technique I had to use, and I always relied on my institutional advisor and my Professor Johnny Palomares to know what I was supposed to do, because it was my first experience my first professional experience in translation, and I was like really not used to this kind of works. So I know that I must do further studies in translation in order to become a professional translator one day. Finally, for the recommendations to the School of Modern Languages, I would recommend adding one course of L2 translation to the translation minor and to expand the existing courses description so that students can have more practice in L2 translation in each course. For me, it was really difficult to know how to translate since I didn't have enough experience, because I have always done translations from English to Spanish and not from Spanish to English. And to the translation service, I would recommend having an office that will be exclusively for working in translation projects, since the office is currently shared with other offices and it can be difficult to be fully concentrated on the work. For me, it was impossible to do translations at the translation service. I had to work at home because I can concentrate with the noise. So I think that that's also maybe a skill that I need to develop further time, because it is important to be able to be fully concentrated on the work. Finally, I would like to acknowledge to all the people who were there during my internship, all the people who helped me and who gave me this experience, which was my first professional experience in translation. I would like to acknowledge specifically to Ms. Yelitza Barrios and to Professor Johnny Palomares for all their help that they gave me. Bye.